Glory to Jesus Christ. Thank you for joining us. The aim of this class is to gain the art of spiritual life through the teaching of Holy Bishop Ignatius Brianchaninov. This study has already transformed many lives, and we hope your life will be transformed too.
In the name of the Father, of the Son, of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and power and glory, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, now and ever and forever. Amen. So welcome back. We are going to finish chapter 17. Yeah, we are sure, because there are only 2 paragraphs, so we will be able to finish today. Wow. Again, I have to tell that even we call it like book study, it should be more like a formation class. You know, that it's not only to gain information, but to have time to stay with these words or these themes for some kind of longer time, and to let them to get to our bones, to our soul, and to allow them to become part of our nature, part of our life. Coming, please.
I said you were late for coming.
Good. We are happy that you are here. Hello, Mark. Hello. 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 I don't know if we have enough chairs. So who doesn't have a chair, please sit on the floor.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't hear I didn't know what you meant.
All right. Good. All right, so we are going to continue with on page 1 to 6, the last paragraph on this page, and we'll finish the chapter. Please.
The appearance of spiritual love for one's neighbor is a sign of the renewal of the soul by the Holy Spirit. The theologian says again, "We know that we have passed from death to life because we love the brethren. He who does not love his brother abides in death." The perfection of Christianity is contained in the perfect love for one's neighbor. Perfect love for one's neighbor is contained in love for God, which has no limit of perfection, which is eternal. Growth in God's love is eternal because love is eternal God. Love for one's neighbor is the foundation of all other love. Beloved brother, seek to reveal in yourself true spiritual love for your neighbor. Having acquired it, you will acquire love for God, and you will enter the gates of resurrection, the gates of the heavenly kingdom. Amen.
So it's a beautiful conclusion of this chapter, but actually, chapter which follows is love towards God, and we will see that actually those 2 chapters are really connected. And, what he taught us during this chapter is that at first we have to purify our understanding of love, because our passions really force us to understand love through this prism of pleasures. Each passion offers us some kind of pleasure, and many times we even, when we try to love the others, many times we do it when we try to do good deeds to our neighbors because we want to satisfy these desires or passions. And even we don't think about it, but we have to somehow always test these our deeds and these movements in our soul, because very often we can find behind our love towards neighbor just desire for praise. We want people to see us in good light. We desire, may people praise us, may they see us as good people. Or it's really easy to find, we can find many other reasons, even sometimes just to come to some kind of satisfaction that, I am coming to perfectness, and it can be motivation it can be like big chunk of pride that we want to be we want to see ourselves in this light. To love neighbor, it means to be faithful to God's words and to do what God says us, with this understanding that even if we do everything towards our neighbors, this love towards neighbors, what Christ told us or gave us as an order, as a commandment, still we are doing only what servants do, what servants receive as a command, nothing more. Well, it keeps us humble, and this is condition for this real growth in love. And true is that, as he said, probably before that test of our love is fulfillment of commandments. And so it means that to love our neighbor, to try love our neighbors through keeping our commandments, this is something what causes like very painful transformation of our soul. It's this process through which we can recognize our bad habits, our passions, and the need to get them out for our soul from our heart. So it's a painful process, and actually through this painful process we are acquiring ability to love God. Nobody who doesn't love God, doesn't love a neighbor can love God. It is a lie. It's impossible. All right, so okay, Sarah.
So I had Miran and I were talking a little bit after our class last week, and it struck me because we talked so much about loving one's neighbor and the kindness that you show your neighbor and how you should love your neighbor. But I thought it was interesting that the night before I had read in the sayings of the Desert Fathers. Let's see. I'm trying to find it. It's about Abba Arsenius. Said Abba Arsenius would not readily meet people, while Abba Theodore was like steel when he met anyone. So meaning he was cold and didn't want to receive people. So I thought it was interesting the holiness of people can be one way or the other showing love.
Yeah, why they were so cold.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think, that they didn't love God, love their neighbors?
Well, to me it seems like they didn't want the distraction of.
Yeah, you're right. Well, this is something what we have to. There's some kind of false understanding that if we try to love our neighbors, we have to run towards them and to really try to fulfill all the needs, to give ourselves, to them in fullness. It is like this heroic, thing. But at first we have to remember that the first step is always our own salvation. It's maybe not. Somehow I have this feeling when I read these Holy Fathers, that they nobody said this, like I'm going to say this, but I think that they proclaim this spiritual egoism. It means that salvation of souls is the most important thing. And so they are running away from everything what can destroy this salvation of their souls.
But that also kind of ties into what we read last week that says, give honor to your neighbor as the image of God. Honor him in your heart secretly so that only your conscience may see it.
Sure.
So, you don't necessarily have to show this outward, overly flamboyant love or welcoming to someone or accommodation. You can love them in a way that's silent.
Yeah. I agree with that. There is this understanding that what I was talking about, these passions and bad habits which can attack this or to taint this our love towards neighbors. So we have to be very careful. And as you said, that to do it in secretly, but in accord with God's commandment, there is the way. For sure, we should somehow be very careful with this some kind of exalted ways that to showing our love. Many times we cannot help. We have to realize we cannot help, and when we realize that there is no way how can I help, it doesn't make sense to stay and to just to use a lot of words, somehow an empty words. It might be good if, you say easily, I cannot help you, but I will pray for you. But then to go and to spend a long time in prayer, really begging God for help, it's quite difficult. And true is that I am not able to really explain this question, but always for me when I am reading this Life of Saints and these sayings of the Fathers, and I understand what they are doing. They are protecting themselves or their souls from some kind of false movements which can really taint their love. And they do it for their protection because they don't trust themselves. Wait a minute.
I don't remember the name of the monk, but there's another saying in there about this monk who, after Holy Communion at the liturgy, he would, as soon as the liturgy was over, he would run away and hide himself in his cell. And the other monks started to get kind of offended because they felt like he didn't want to talk to them. So they asked him, whatever his name was, I think it might have been John, but they said, Brother John, why are you fleeing the brethren after liturgy? And he said, I'm not fleeing the brethren, I'm fleeing the demons. And so the way that the saints treat outsiders, especially, but even their own brethren sometimes, can seem really cold, they're trying to insult a person or something like that. But really, I think it's they're keeping themselves distant because they have a self-knowledge that is very deep, and they understand that how easily the passions can be like inflamed and then attached to other people. So they want to keep those interactions short so that they don't get all entangled with other people. It's not necessarily because the people themselves are dangerous, but because they're weak.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, and yeah, it's a good comment, and I think that even like thing is that we have this tendency as Christians. We know that we should allow our neighbor. It is like order, but we have these tendencies that what does it mean, you know, and that many times we really push ourselves some kind of artificially to be loving, you know, and we love, we try to do good things to others, but somehow we feel this push that to show it so visibly that we start to pretend something, you know, and I think that's it for this topic. I think that it's not about what is our visible, our outside direction is, what is in our heart. This sacrifice for others, to do and to wish good things for the other, especially salvation. And if we follow commandments towards which command something as an action towards our neighbors, and we do it, we should not somehow care about how this outside world is reading this our activity. It should be enough for us to know that God sees what is in our heart, that when He sees our intentions. This would be my understanding of, you know.
Well, it kind of makes me think about like Bishop Abel and Archbishop Philip. They're so silent, but then when you look at them, they just have this like silent love. You just feel immediate like holiness and love like coming from them, just in them sitting there in front of you. You know, it's something that is so rare and unusual to see.
Yeah, you are right. You are right, but this is what comes to after many years of trials, you know, and controlling themselves and purification of heart and mind. Remember that they have spent many years really in strict life as monks before they became bishops. So it is very visible. This is ascetical life. Is bring this. You can feel that, but it is genuine. They didn't play anything.
Right.
They didn't pretend that. I really hate, you know, when I see this, you know, like when there's a procession to the altar or from the altar, and in the end Bishop is going with this wild smile, waving to everybody, and it's so fake, you know. It's I cannot help myself, but like you mentioned the Archbishop Philip, but you know, you could see that he was walking this procession in Ireland. He was meeting all families, and he was like one of those bishops who just looked down to earth, you know, that, and with this, he has, even when you look first at him, you see like he's like angry, you know, that he with a smile, but something was coming out from him. When you look at him, you could see something authentic, you know, that and I think that this is something what it is some kind of result of culture or habit, how we act as we are expected to act. But I think that more authentic is to be yourself, you know. I don't think that if you can love your neighbor and to do good to the neighbor without this sometimes artificial signs of love, you know. Because we have to admit that to love our neighbor it's not easy, it is sacrifice. You know, that so we should do it, not to pretend that, probably I'm not able to explain correctly. Does it make sense what I'm saying? Yes, Bill?
Okay, I'm going back a couple paragraphs.
All right.
But it says, the holy love will begin the illumination in your heart. It's over in 26th, second paragraph. But that's how it ends. And I truly believe when you talk about holy love, I mean, you can walk into a stranger on the street or someone you've met, and by conversation, you can tell that person's Christian.
Sure,
Without, you know, no doubt in your mind, that heart is illuminated. Your heart is illuminated to them.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
And
I agree
that I think that's more. That's I guess true holy love as opposed to saying hugging people or anything like that. It exudes from within the person.
So yeah, you are right, and I think that everybody can somehow recognize or feel this, that there is something different. This kind of love it's not fake love. It's something genuine there. Aggie?
I'm trying to figure out a way to formulate this question, if that makes sense. So I apologize if I stumble. But it seems like there's a distinction between the external effects of charity, which would be consolations, so to speak, in relationships, and then its actual substance, which charity being an infused virtue from God, it deals substantially with someone's salvation. And so with the fathers, St. John Climacus says that if you truly love, go and pray in secret, because this is the love that's acceptable to God. And so it seems like culturally we want the exterior effects of charity without its actual substance. We want, as a culture, not individually, Christianity without Christ. So there's this love of do good to your neighbor, go serve the poor, do all these things, but it's hollow because it's missing salvation. And outside of the church, you can have everything but that. So I guess I would just question, obviously, with the, I don't know what you would call them, examples, I guess, examples that have been given. They're describing people who seem cold or seem distant, but have a very strong interior life that's directed towards the salvation of souls, which is, charity in its very essence. And even though those external effects might be removed, in a sense, that's just a testament to the fact that they understand that love is in the will, and it's not something that's emotional. So, I guess my question would be, obviously, living in the world, there are times when either you wouldn't show the exterior effects of charity, like compliments, or telling people that you like what they're doing, or being over complimentary. You would avoid that because it's not necessarily a good thing to engage in, but because it's countercultural, you would then seem distant. So I don't know exactly what my question is, but it's surrounding that culture. I think you touched on it a little bit, but that's just further clarification about this. The exterior effects of charity stemming from the interior disposition of caring and giving yourself completely to God for the salvation of souls. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm glad.
Well, it's again, we started a very difficult topic. Love is really fulfillment of God's will. Love is keeping commandments which are connected towards our neighbors, and to try to do good things to others. Okay. This is what Christ told us, or commanded us. But, well, did he tell us somewhere that go and smile at everybody? You know, there's not commandments, you know this. And it might help one thing that I don't remember now because it came to my mind, but I would need to find it. There was like one book, a monk was writing about his life on Mount Athos, and he just started this life in monastery. Actually, it was like small brotherhood, and they lived in some kind of very simple house, not in monastery, but was connected with monastery. It was very cold there, and he said that one day when outside was cold and freezing, like wind, and it was very cold, the superior gave him fish, or somebody brought them fish, so he can go and clean the fish outside. And he already said my hands were like, I'm almost so cold that he said, I am afraid that I can lose my fingers, so cold it was there. And to have this image that, well, when he started to think to go out and to start to clean this in this freezing weather fish, so he hesitated. And there was a monk who, he said that this monk was always silent in this brotherhood. I always had this like no smile on the face, and they were rare. It was rare when he said something. This monk stood up, took fish, went out, cleaned the fish, returned back, put on a table, and returned back to his corner when he continued prayer. And this young monk, he said, at that time, he was always like scared of this monk. And he said, from the time I realized that he loves me more than himself. You know, it's and this is love. When we see needs of others and we just do it without saying word, you know, without saying I remember one moment, you know, when it very touched me when I was probably in high school, and I was with my father somewhere, I don't know where we were, and so somebody approached him, and the person was talking about one problem. It was a very serious problem, and my father, he said nothing. Somehow he finished the discussion, but he didn't touch this problem. And I know that on our way home in car, I was thinking about this, and I was somehow, I had something like in my heart against him. I said, well, you are a priest, and the person was asking some kind of for help, and you said nothing, you know, you ignored this person. But we came home, and I know that he ordered me to unload the trunk. We had something, and he said, I have to go to church. And at the time, it was clear for me that he went and he returned after a while. And I realized that, it was my really big sin that I judged him. Probably he didn't have an answer. He said nothing, but immediately when he got home, he went to talk to God about this. And he said nothing. He even didn't say that, I'm going to pray for you or something, what usually you say. And then I realized this was like one of very powerful moments in my life when I realized that love is something different than I think. I don't know if this helped, but it came to my mind, and it seems like easy chapter about love, but it caused so many questions and conversations. Let's make a move because we will stay only these 2 paragraphs. So let's start to another chapter, and probably even this new chapter on loving God will help us to bring clarification to our questions more.
Love God in the way that he commanded us to love him, not in the way that the deluded dreamers think to love him. Do not invent ecstasies for yourself. Do not agitate your nerves. Do not inflame yourself with a sensual fire, a fire of your blood. The sacrifice that pleases God is humility of heart, compunction of soul. God angrily turns away from a sacrifice brought with self-assurance and proud arrogance, even if it were a whole burnt offering.
Well, again, this in similar way as in previous chapter, in the beginning, St. Ignatius tries to point that we might have wrong idea about love towards God. And this is, I allow this first sentence, love God in the way that he commanded us to love, not in the way that the deluded dreamers think to love him. And again, as St. John says, that we love God when we keep his commandments. So all these, some kind of feelings, emotions, or some kind of these states of our heart when we somehow try to tell ourselves that we love God, we have to be suspicious towards this if we don't keep commandments. If we are still fighting with our passions, which force us to cause God's anger. And again, this is I would say that we have to be careful because this society around us, I think that is more than before. Now we meet people who are on fire. We can see that, this person is talking about God, it's not fire, and always, and we don't feel this in our soul, and it leads us to somehow to bring this emotion, the same state to our soul without work. That we want to make a jump in our spiritual life, jump to be on fire, and really we can come to this full state. And as I reminded many times already here, I have to remind that this attempt to make this jump in spiritual life according to words of Saint Isaac the Syrian, he says that this jump brings God's wrath, God's anger on person. So it means that we can stay in this illusion, which is not true, and we can come to some kind of satisfaction that where we are somewhere where we are not, and we skip or we waste with our time which we are supposed to use for cleansing our heart and mind, because we think that we are already perfect, or we are somewhere where we are not. Many times it is that, that this desire for perfectness, especially when we read the spiritual literature or we listen to good testimonies given by others, and we somehow we can come to this conclusion that we can identify movements, some kind of our emotions in the heart, that we are already there in those people. So what is this is very dangerous thing, that to stay down is very important and it is interesting that for me it is that when I go to my childhood and or I was growing, it was rare to see, like some kind of, like in these communities, Christian communities where I was, some kind of pretending that I am holy somehow, or that I'm more perfect in faith or in spiritual life. It was rare. I think that more was this attitude that, well, I need help because I'm a sinner. I think that I saw this more, but I think that once this declination of this Christian life came more and more, so probably there was a need to separate from this who are not believers, and many times by pretending, that not with intention. This is that I don't want to say that it is that is false. That I think that who is infected by this temptation, it's not that it is done with intention that I want to pretend now, I want to look nicer. That it's just genuine but wrong. And there's many reasons for that, and it is difficult to heal that person from that state. Okay, can continue.
Pride agitates the nerves, inflames the blood, awakens the imagination, and stimulates a fallen life. Humility calms the nerves, cools the blood, destroys imagination, eradicates the fallen life, and awakens life in Jesus Christ. To obey is better than sacrifice, and to heed than the fat of rams, said the prophet to the king of Israel, who dared to offer God an unlawful sacrifice. If you desire to bring God a sacrifice of love, do not bring it willfully without preparing it thoughtfully. Bring it with humility in time and place that God himself commanded. The spiritual place where God commanded us to bring spiritual sacrifices is humility.
So again, this last sentence, it came from Saint Pimen the Great, and it's amazing how this great holy ascetics, they always remind us this need for humility. There were these warriors who spent life in the deserts alone, testing all the time their hearts, and I think that they are masters in this art of knowing human heart. And many of them, they went through these difficulties. They were deceived many times. Many times they follow like illusions, but they were healed from that, and they are giving us their wisdom. And so it means that Bishop Brianchaninov reminds us that without humble heart we cannot expect any progress in spiritual life, because humility causes that we take our concentration from us to God, and because of that we can be protected from these temptations and illusions which passions still ruling in our heart are offering us. So we have to really somehow always search for what is God's will, and we should not trust to our thoughts or what does it mean to serve God. We should bring like sacrifice which depends on doing works and deeds which are coming from knowing of God's will. And this obedience to God's will, to following His commandment, not what we want but what He wants, attracts God's grace, and we can grow. All right? All right, so let's continue.
The Lord gave exact and accurate signs by which one can distinguish the one who loves from the one who hates. He said, "If anyone loves me, he will keep my word. He who does not love me does not keep my words." Do you want to learn to love God? Separate yourself from any word, deed, thought, and feeling forbidden by the Gospels. Through your battle with sin, which is so loathed by God, show and prove your love for God. If you should fall into sin because of your spiritual sickness, immediately find healing in repentance. But it is even better to try not to fall into sin in the first place by strict watchfulness over yourself. Do you want to learn to love God? Carefully study the commandments of the Lord in the Gospels and try to fulfill them in deed, trying to make the virtues of the Gospel into habitual characteristics of your nature. It is typical of the lover to completely fulfill the will of the beloved.
Yeah, so Holy Fathers, they non-stop and again, they remind us this sign of way how to know state of our heart, and they say that like keeping commandments is sign of love towards God. They don't trust emotions. They ignore emotions of heart because they know that they have power to bring to heart to illusion. And look, this is very interesting. That I was moved by one priest who said, he was moved to, I was moved by his testimony, but he said he was moved when one person who came for confession started with words, started confession with these words, "I didn't love God because I didn't keep His commandments." And he expresses a sin, and he said, "Well, how much truth is in that, how this person understood this message of gospel. But maybe it would be good now to remind ourselves, we touched it before when we are talking about commandments, but again, that the Holy Fathers, if they are talking about commandments, what we are supposed to keep, well, they don't think under that only like these commandments which are coming from like this Decalogue, these 10 commandments. They mean gospel. They really, they say gospel is each Lord's word is commandment for us. Well, not each, but majority it is. And it's very useful for us that if we read gospel from this, in this way, that to try to find out all commandments there. So it might be good exercise that to tell, I will read this month or next 2 months or 3 months gospel slowly, with this intention to find all commandments of Lord. For example, like first commandment we find in gospel is in Mark: repent, reform your life. And you know, this is order. So for example, if I am coming to confess my sins, and I find out that, well, I didn't do anything from my soul in the spirit of this, in that for reform my life, I have to confess it. I broke this commandment. I didn't try to do something to fulfill this commandment. And so it is very, very important to keep this in mind, that it's so easy for us to many times to go through these 10 commandments, and to slide on the surface, not to go into the depth. Okay, comments? Nothing. So let's take another paragraph.
Therefore, have I loved thy commandments more than gold and topaz? Therefore, have I held straight to all thy commandments. I have hated every wrong way, said the prophet. Such behavior is necessary to remain faithful to God. Faithfulness is inevitably linked to love. Without this faithfulness, love falls apart. We attain the love of God through constantly turning away from evil and fulfilling the virtues of the gospel, which contain the entirety of the gospel's moral teaching. Through this process, we remain in love for God. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, said the Savior. Perfection in love is found in union with God. Success in love is connected with incomprehensible spiritual comfort, joy, and illumination. But in the beginning of our efforts, the disciple of love must withstand a terrible war within himself, with his deeply damaged nature. Evil, which has become natural through sin, has become a law for him, which fights and rebels against the law of God, against the law of holy love.
So again, he reminds us really this warning not to trust our emotions. You know, it's we can see and feel from his words, but he mentions now that this union with God, when we reach that, is connected with gifts God gives us, the spiritual comfort, joy, illumination. But he says that but before there's this horrible war we have to go through, and through which our heart is illuminated, purified and clean. And then we will have access to this God's gifts, but those are different quality than that are like emotions which are coming from our carnal body. And to go through this war, it means to learn to know truth, and actually to have this humble heart to be open to accept this truth. Without that, we cannot make progress. One deacon came to me a few years ago, and he was some kind complaining that he asked for an advice. That he said that he was asked to preach on Sunday, and like before that, it was his habit. He gave his homily like on Thursday or Friday to pastor for approval, and pastor called him and said, "Well, let's discuss that and like remove like several paragraphs that you have to redo this, because," he said, "you are too strict." He said people should come from the church uplifted. And the deacon said, "Well," he told him, but I told truth. Like, this is like explanation of the gospel. But if it is too tough, but it is gospel is tough." But he had no success in this. So he was asking what he's supposed to do. But I think that it is in us many times that we want to present, not only for ourselves, or even for others, like gospel in this some kind more attractive way, that it is like something easy, joyful. But true is that if we take gospel, it is so radical change in our life that until we adjust our life according to the gospel, it is this horrible war with ourselves. But we have to know this truth, we have to understand this truth, and we have to accept this, many times this encouragement or presentation as well. Yes, this is the way. Gospel, to fulfill commandments of gospel, it means that it will be tough for you, that you will suffer this horrible war with yourself. And it is okay, because this is necessary for your purification. And this was present. I am sure that to live this aspect of cross, which are supposed to take every day, that we abandoned this cross, and we were trying to gain this fruit of gospel, of teaching of gospel, in some easier way, without this war with ourselves, without defeating our passions, without putting away this old Adam which is in us, because I think that is source of many crises in church, many crises in we don't have vocation, because vocations, and we don't have this some kind of strength in this some kind of leadership in families, or leadership of fathers in families. This is very. We are not learned. Through this, we eliminated this aspect. We forget how to serve to God. That it's. Does it make sense? All right. So, come questions, comments, nothing. So I would. Okay, Maggie.
One reason I heard that, he says that like this war prepares you to receive spiritual comfort, joy, and illumination. But when you look at the lives of the saints, it's often the end of their lives that are, at least from our perspective, the worst part of their passion. So like if you look at the martyrs, they die a very horrible or painful death. Or like St. Francis receives the stigma, all that kind of thing. And I was reading St. John of the Cross, and I just wonder if he prepares us to suffer, but because of the purity of heart, that suffering becomes a consolation, like to be able to suffer with the man of sorrows. And like I wonder if by that joy and that spiritual comfort, he's talking about that suffering and that passion. Because when you come to that with purity of heart, you recognize that in that suffering you become like Christ, and that unity is consolation for the soul.
Sure. I will agree that, well, those are things that we probably touching it like from reading. And as I said several times before, like it's very visible in Eastern spirituality, especially when you go to these countries when we are really marked by this, like Russia. And if you read books, poems, song, you listen to songs from the, not these modern ones now, but you go so you can find this phenomenon there. They call it that it is joy through tears, and this phenomenon is what brings this spirituality, because there is in the middle of this suffering, this war with myself, more I am purified, more I receiving this consolation from God. But this consolation I cannot compare to anything what I can experience from the world. So it means that in the same time, this mingling of these two aspects, I am still fighting, leading war with my body, with my mind, with my heart, and with desire to be purified, to be faithful to God. On the other hand, I am experiencing this sweetness of God's grace I am receiving. So it is something what it's difficult to explain, but as this Holy Father say, well, you will know it when you get it. You will be able to recognize these moments of God's visitation, the consolation when it comes, and you will be able to recognize it from these false, like some kind of feelings which comes from human heart and which comes from world. It's totally different, and you will know that.
Can I ask a follow-up question that has more to do with something you read earlier in this chapter?
Yeah.
How that attitude of, I don't know if the word, like the phrase is appropriate, but like good enough, like in the spiritual life as a Christian, how much of that do you think comes from comparison? Because the culture that we're living in right now is so not Christian that I think it's very easy to, at least I found in my experience, to think because you're slightly different, or maybe you follow one or two of the commandments and you go to Mass on Sunday, to think that you're it, like you're Catholic, you're separated from the world, all that sort of thing, because there's this false illusion created by comparison. And I wonder how much of it has to do with that, and then how much of it has to do with the absence, unfortunately, a lot of places of a true Catholic spirituality that focuses not on the actions of men, but on the perfection of God. So I guess I would just ask, like, because if we don't really understand who God is, we can't understand ourselves in reference to Him. So I would just ask, like, what is that? I don't know.
Well, it's quite a difficult question. Maggie, as always, from you. And we don't have like time for not we are finishing, but and truth is that I don't know answer for that. But what is my experience is that what is very important, is something what we are doing like here. We have to relearn what does it mean spiritual life. Because if before you had like Christian community, which there were many people, not all, but many, who were like giving this example, what does it mean to believe in God, to sacrifice. We lost this support of Christian community because in some way during decades we went to some kind, we lost this depth of our faith. We lost this ability to sacrifice, to bring sacrifice, and we lost this desire for perfectness and holiness, for this deep intimacy with God. And it has a lot to do with that we became too busy in our lives, and many other things. I think that today it is like very important for each of us to take responsibility for our own life, to ask hard questions. Do I really want to be saved? To study what these teachers of spiritual life say, and to try to follow them. We have to renew this spiritual Christian community which would give support to next generations. I think this is our role in this time, in this age, to become renewed like Christians. Does it make sense? Jim?
I think the next step to what you're thinking is like, well, compared to everybody else, I'm doing pretty good, is pride. And it's like half a step away. You know, I think myself, you know, that could lead very easily.
I have one other thing to say about this. I pity your entire generation, including my daughter too, because you live on social media where everybody tells everybody else what they're doing, and so you're judging what you do based on everybody else instead of being individuals and following what you're supposed to follow, instead of worrying about what everybody else is thinking about what you did, what you said, what you look like, how you dress, how you smile on a selfie. When I was growing up, and you know, it was just like 10 years ago, like, you know, back in the 50s, my mom, there's 6 girls in our family. You know, one of the most important phrase was when I heard going to school, and from both my grandparents, self-praise stinks. And today, it's totally opposite. I mean, back in the 50s when we were growing up, back in the 60s when we were growing up, it was always, you don't ever draw attention to yourself. You don't ever say, oh, look what I did, I'm a good person. But now, today, it's crazy. When I don't have a Facebook account. I look at it occasionally, but I say to myself, my God, how much time are people spending on here promoting themselves instead of just doing what you're supposed to be doing? You know, that's from an old woman here, but I'm telling you, your life is hard because you're being judged from every single angle in the world. It's
all right.
Okay.
We hope you enjoyed this podcast. Please share it with those who might like to be enriched by this teaching of Holy Bishop Ignatius. If you live in our area, we would love if you could join us for our study in person on Monday nights at 7 p.m. at St. Nicholas Byzantine Catholic Church in Barberton, Ohio. Thank you and God bless.